Michael Schuerman, Vice President of Growth at Doorsey. And the title of this discussion is The Growth Mindset.
Awesome. All right. We'll keep going, guys. If it gets bad, just let me know. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties. Again, not sure what's going on. So anyway, so the first two things I have up here, because these are the most important things in my life. So I'm a husband of 11 years, a father of 3. I have an 8-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old son, a 3-year-old son. So you can imagine life stays pretty busy around my household, keeps me on my toes. I like to think of myself as a growth architect, dating way back to, almost like a teenager, just figuring out interesting solutions to kind of everyday problems, and helping those solutions scale, right? So spent a little bit of time at Zillow, helping them develop a new partnership channel, which we scaled about 10x. We can get into numbers on that if you guys want to ping me online, LinkedIn. But I do spend a majority of my time in the property tech space, or the prop tech space, which is really fun and exciting because the 10-year arc on this industry, it's a massive problem to solve. And I think there's, multiple problems on the micro scale within that industry, but that is kind of what I'm focused on at the moment in terms of solving some big problems there. So I do live in Atlanta, Georgia. So go Bulldogs. I'm not originally from here. I grew up in Orlando, Florida. So you guys can table all your Disney jokes. Probably heard them all. But yeah, I did grow up in Orlando. And I went to UCF. So go Knights, if you guys are familiar with that. And I thought UCF would be a pretty good segue into kind of the first topic. UCF, I don't know if you guys know this. I'm going to throw some fun facts at you because, I'm a big fan of my undergrad and my alma mater. So it does boast the largest undergraduate student body at 70,000 students. So it is the largest university in the nation right now in the US. But more interesting and more of a segue is that it has a huge space program, right? So it's a relatively young university. It was partnered with NASA when it was first launched in the 60s. And about 40% of NASA's employees do come from UCF. So again, go Knights and charge on. But that brings me to my first topic. So I want to talk a little bit about outer space, right? And you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, I just got done with lunch, or I'm about to go to lunch. Why is this guy talking about outer space? Well, we're really supposed to be talking about growth, right? But I think it'll make sense once we start to kind of unpack it. So just stick with me. If you're an outer space nerd like myself, you're going to love it. So let's just dive in. Okay, so the image in the upper left, I'm sure you guys have seen this. It seems like everybody's been talking about it. I was talking about it with my kids. I mean, just tons of fascination around some of the new images that the James Webb Telescope has been able to uncover, images that we've never seen before. So like in this picture, right, we're seeing light and the way that things used to exist over 13 billion years ago, which kind of blows my mind, right? I'm not a NASA person. I don't work for NASA. I'm not a scientist. So how that happens, you guys can do some deeper research. It's probably for another conversation, but it's still pretty mind-blowing when you think about it, right? When you look at that image and seeing kind of an early part of a universe that existed, well before our time now. The other thing is, over 100 years ago, we thought we were kind of the only galaxy. And as we developed this advanced technology, we're starting to uncover, right? I say we, like I'm one of the scientists, but we're starting to uncover that there's trillions of galaxies out there, which is pretty mind-blowing. And to kind of add context to this picture, right? This picture was taken in terms of the size of it was about a grain of sand. Right. So when my kids and I were talking about it, we were looking at a little speck of salt, right? And it's like essentially the imagery that we're seeing in this, and obviously there's plenty others, you guys can Google it, really amazing photos, right? But in the size of a speck of sand, right? That just blows my mind, right? Makes me feel really small. I don't know about you guys. If you thought about this a lot, I start to think about it more and more, especially when I see images like this. I think about it every morning when I get up, and it's just like, wow, the universe is so big. Right. And it makes me feel so small. And then really kind of dives into what's my purpose. Right. The other picture right here, I thought was also fascinating. Right. This was from over 2,000 years ago. Right. Before writing was starting to be even invented in the ancient Mesopotamian times. besides being a beautiful image, right? It just blows my mind again that we can capture something of this magnitude that existed 2,000 years ago, but we can see it present day just because of all the science and things behind light, right? In terms of how we're able to do that. So kind of segueing into that, guys, the 1 in 400 trillion, right? You're like, okay, well, what does that mean? We're going through a lot of space statistics here, but I want to start pivoting to us, right? So 1 in 400 trillion is the odds that you were even born, right? It's the odds that even I was born. When I kind of was doing some research, right, for this talk today, again, just really blew my mind. I was like, I already thought I was small, right? When there's trillions of galaxies and some within the speck of a grain of sand, right? But even more so in the sense of, man, it took 1 in 400 trillion odds just for me to be born. It's, yeah, just unbelievable. So pause for a second, let that fact sink in. I think it's really important, guys, as we wake up every morning. I mean, it's a blessing to have, air in our lungs, be able to tackle and do the things that we love to do. If you got friends, family, what have you, right? Every day, every morning we wake up, it's a blessing. So again, the chances of us virtually existing are almost zero, right? I saw an analogy where it said if we kind of combined all the oceans together, right, and eliminated all the turtles except one, and we threw a life buoy into the ocean, right, off of a boat, the exact chances in terms of this 1 to 400 trillion, right, would be that turtle comes up and surfaces the water and hits the dead center of that buoy, right? Pretty slim chance, and in fact, very, very, very slim, and 1 to 400 trillion. So hopefully that puts it in context to you. But for another analogy, I thought this was also interesting, right? So the Hubble telescope, and you guys can kind of see the difference between the two. I think they actually complement each other, right? The Hubble telescope, looking at the exact same image, right? When we look at it through the James Webb telescope, uncovers all these other things, right? We're literally looking at it on the left in the Hubble telescope, right? But in the right, look at all the other things that are there, but it just took changing our lens or changing our perspective to see that, right? How often does that happen in our day-to-day, where we need to kind of pause and reflect, and even in some cases lean on some other people to gain better perspective and help us uncover the things that are not there, right? Which kind of starts to lead us into this growth topic, right? But how much more could we understand, right? If we kind of understood and changed our perspective and paused throughout the day, right? I think we would gain a lot more perspective, not just from a life understanding, but also from a business understanding as well, right? So now that we've talked about outer space, you guys are like, okay, where's he going with this? I do want to talk about the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset, right? And some of you guys are kind of probably already familiar with this. You're in the growth field, perhaps. But I think some of this is interesting, and I think we're going to learn a thing or two in terms of what we think fixed mindset or growth mindset is versus what it really is, right? So fixed mindset, right? Typically, we believe that intelligence and talents are static, right? Success is accomplished solely based on the talent and little effort from that. A growth mindset, an example, I guess, before I go into that, right? A fixed mindset, kind of, you guys know people like this, right? And just a spoiler alert, we're all growth and fixed mindset. It's a mix, right? Nobody is a pure growth mindset. We'll talk about that in a second, so hang tight. But the fixed mindset person, I know, I have a father-in-law, very fixed mindset, right? Where it says, this is the way it's always been done, right? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but either way, this is the way it's always been done. So why change it, right? Whereas a growth mindset, right, is going to say, hey, yeah, this has been the always way it's been done. But let's look at a new way of maybe doing this. See if we can make it more efficient. See if we can make it better. See if customers love it more, right? So some of the things that make up a growth mindset is embracing challenges, right? People with a growth mindset view failure as a springboard for growth and to stretch our abilities, right? So the fixed mindset person is going to look, they're going to do their best to avoid all risk, all failure. And again, we're both guys, right? And we've been in situations where we want to avoid risk and failure, right? And sometimes we see that failure because it reveals inadequacies about us. Maybe that we're coming up short in some ways. And obviously I'm in the same boat with you, right? We've all been there. and it sucks. No one likes to feel that way, but the failure is not something that defines us, right? And so trying to work our growth muscle, if you will, right? Getting ourselves into that growth mindset will help us look at setbacks in a different way, right? They don't label us. Setbacks can be motivating, right? And an informative input, kind of like a wake-up call. So I tried something, I failed. What is this information telling me? How can I pivot, right? Whether it's with your team, whether it's your personal life, something you're trying, like a sales funnel in your business, right? Failures are a great thing. You guys have heard this over and over, I'm sure, from people much more smarter than myself, right? But I want to caution us to also be careful, right, about the growth mindset, because there's some misconceptions that I think probably don't often get talked about, right? Which is, I already have it, and I always have had it, right? Since I was born this way. But people often confuse kind of a growth mindset, and I did too for a long time until I kind of learned what a true growth mindset was. We confuse that with being flexible or open-minded or having a positive outlook. Qualities, we feel like everyone has always had, but again, we're a mixture of both mindsets. And the only way that continues to evolve is with experience. Pure growth mindset doesn't exist, guys, which is crazy because some of us always believe that, right? Oh, I'm born this way. I'm always positive, never negative. I'll turn a negative into a positive. But the fact is we do have both, right? It's just about being more self-aware in terms of subconsciously or consciously being able to address it, and also doing some things throughout our days and installing that into our daily routines to make sure that we strengthen that muscle, if you will, right? The other misconception, right, which is a growth mindset, is just about praising and rewarding effort. And that's not necessarily a good thing either, because this isn't true, for example, for students in school. It's definitely not true for employees and organizations. In both settings, the outcomes matter, right? So an unproductive effort obviously is never a good thing. It's critical to reward not just the effort, right, but maybe the learning, the process, and to emphasize the process that yields those things, such as seeking help from others, which I do very often, trying new strategies, and then capitalizing on setbacks to move forward effectively. So, the outcome, the bottom line, follows deeply, guys, from engaging in these processes. So now that we've talked about what the difference is between growth mindset, fixed mindset, and being aware of some of the misconceptions, and we kind of break that down, I also want to, kind of end this section with a positive note, right? Which is, regardless of how we differ, right, on this call, and if you're listening to this after the recording, we all have different talents, and that's something to be celebrated, right? Different aptitudes, different interests, temperaments, what have you. But the good news is this, right? We can still grow, right, through the application of some of the things we're going to talk about, some things that I might not talk about that you're already doing. So keep on doing those, but it is about the application and the experience, right? So let's dive into, okay, we know the difference, right? We're aware of the misconceptions. Michael, how do we grow this muscle, right? How do we get better with our growth mindset? So I always say, we're going to hit the growth gym, right? You guys ready? Cool. All right. So listen, I want to go through a few exercises. And before I go into this, so hear me out. Okay, some of this is a little philosophical. I am getting stuff in the next section, so stick with me. The practical, hey, show me tactically, how do I solve a problem, that I'm trying to solve within my business. But believe me, when I first saw some of these exercises, a couple of years ago, I was like, yeah, these are just, yoga type mentality, soft concepts, right? But I promise you, right, if you guys try some of this stuff, you will start to see the change. You will start to see results. So just stick with me, right? Keep an open mind, keep a growth mindset as we go into some of these exercises, okay? So the first exercise is introspection, right? Simple enough. Introspection obviously is a great method when you're engaging in mindset activities. Take the time to reflect on your triumphs and challenges, right? So a very easy way I want to give you guys kind of a framework here is to kind of look at it like this, right? So first we talk about the rose, right? You've heard people say, oh, you got rose-colored glasses on, right? You look at everything positively. Nothing's bad. But in this case, this is good. We do want to jot down, and for those of you guys that love to journal, this is also a great exercise for that. But you want to figure out the highlights, right? The positive events that happened that day, that week. And it can consist of celebrating even small victories, right? Maybe it was a small sale that led to a bigger sale, or is going to lead to a bigger sale. Different successes and kind of appreciating the moments that went well, right? Next, we're going to move to the thorn, right? This is a setback or anything negative that may have occurred that week or that day. You're going to focus on the challenge, right? We're not going to run away from those. We're going to press into it. And any roadblocks that might have hindered, right, any work that had, blocked you from achieving that successful outcome, right? And then lastly, guys, we're going to look to the future a little bit, right, in terms of what's budding right now, what's coming to fruition. Obviously, this area refers to something you're looking forward to in the future. It could be personal, it could be business. This is a great exercise to do with your employees as well, by the way, and start creating that culture of growth mindset. But everything is an opportunity to explore the possible outcomes and apply new learnings, right? Think of like Google's like hackathon, right? And all these other things that go on in these tech companies where new products and new ideas are developed, new services, because they took the time to do some of this and get introspective and come up with new creative solutions, right? Exercise number 2 is find the positives, right? So again, guys, I know this is really hokey to do this. I never used to stand in front of a mirror or whatever, but I've met tons of people in the growth end that do this, right? And if looking in front of the mirror is scary, which for me it is, I kind of scare myself when I get in front of the mirror. Another way you can do this is record yourself, right? I know some growth experts that are really, really good at what they do. And they record some of these positive phrases and them, right, as they go to sleep, to kind of ingrain that in the subconscious mind, right? So things like, I strive for progress, not perfection. I wonder what this experience is trying to teach me, guys. And it kind of goes back to that first exercise of, what can we do differently, right? What are we learning as we go through this experience? It's okay that I haven't figured it out yet, right? Sometimes we put that pressure on ourselves. I do that all the time, right? Where it's like, hey, this task on me, this is a huge task, right? If I don't accomplish task, there could be some failure within the company. But if I'm putting that all on my own shoulders, right, I'm not giving myself permission to explore and experiment and fail, all right? And those are all good things. So the other thing too, guys, again, we know it's okay to make mistakes, but also to keep telling ourselves this is not a dead end, right? As oftentimes as we'll kind of go down a path of what we think is going to be a successful outcome. It's important that you take them, right? You carve out time, record yourself, use the mirror if you love how you look, right? Talk to yourself. Again, guys, it's super important, right? Because everybody else is talking to you all day long, right? Some of that's positive and some of it's not so much, right? Maybe it's a boss, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a friend that's saying stuff that's not necessarily conductive to your growth. So it's really important that you talk to yourself in a positive way and try to change that outcome. Okay, last one, guys. I'll try to breeze through these. I know we had some tech difficulties, so we're running short on time for Q&A, but exercise 3 is just mindfulness, guys. So whether you're a yoga person, meditation, walking, I actually do my best thinking when I'm walking around the block. New ideas pop into my mind. I'm able to clear my mind before I go on that walk, so I can clear all stressors, right, so that I can think clearly, and the outcomes are typically pretty positive, right? So make sure you're doing that. And again, put in some other things in here like working out with weights or, taekwondo or whatever it is, guys. I mean, for everybody, I think it's going to be different. But you'll notice some of these exercises that are on here, right, involve us stopping, right, major movements at least, and slowing down so that we can kind of catch up with our thoughts, right, and start to kind of digest those thoughts, remove what doesn't need to be there, keep and hold on and unpack what does need to be there, right? So some other growth gym activity, if you will, right? And this will be available on the recording. So again, I'll kind of breeze through these, but take challenges, guys. When Andre reached out to me for this event, I'll use this as a great example. Didn't know him, didn't know Glorium Technologies, but it was an opportunity to kind of stretch and expand. Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. There's still a little bit of an echo though.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry, guys. I've used this setup, all day, every day, and never had issues with it.
Sure.
So not really. What's going on? You want me to continue? You want to jump into questions?
Sure. I could certainly throw some talking points in there, and perhaps expand on some of my thoughts. When somebody is, let's say, going about this process to either balance or ascertain whether they're in a growth or a fixed mindset, what are the first steps to self-correct that for people? Because I think there's that phrase that we as the individuals are often unreliable narrators about ourselves. So for people going about that process, how do they start? Because some people may either have a very inflated sense of self, which is very distorted, or a very deflated sense of self, which is kind of like self-defeating and in some cases self-destructive. So I wanted to know your thoughts as far as the first steps.
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, honestly, Adam, I mean, is you're right. We do kind of lead ourselves astray in a lot of ways, but uh, having a really close circle around you, right, guys? And I'm not talking like LinkedIn acquaintances or things like that. Sometimes maybe that, but having a really close circle around you, I'm talking like 3 to 5 people that you've given permission. I think that's a big one, right? So I might have close friends, but deep down they might feel like, well, I don't really have the authority to speak into Michael's life and tell him what I'm seeing.
Right.
I think the first step is kind of circling up, with that inner circle and saying, hey guys, look, first of all, I'm giving you permission, right? Secondly, I'm going to come to you on a whatever cadence, right, and ask for your feedback of things that you're seeing or things that I could be doing better. You can also kind of establish relationships like these at your workplace as well, right, after time. But I think leaning on that network that really knows you for you, what your core mission is in life in general, plus whatever you're doing in your career, they'll be able to call that out. But on the flip side, you also have to be, you know, be ready to take the feedback and kind of digest that for at least 24 to 48 hours before you're like, yeah, but right.
Right.
Otherwise that feedback from that inner circle starts to kind of die down, and then you're just kind of in an echo chamber, right?
Right. And going off that, let's say in, perhaps more unfortunate cases, if let's say somebody doesn't have, let's say that network of friends and family to lean on, or perhaps that person's network of friends and family is particularly toxic.
Mm, yeah. Now you're getting into deep psychology.
No, it's a great presentation. It made me think of some of these points as you were going through this. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, toxic people, man, and we can probably spend, a couple hours talking about
for
that and
sure.
what the right, I think each situation is going to be different, and it especially gets really hard when it's a family member, right? Like a parent, a brother, a sister that has maybe become toxic, um, to a growth mindset. Um,
Right.
I don't know. There's a lot of solutions there, but I think each person, listening right now is probably going to find their own path to that. I think temporarily removing someone like that is fine and in some cases healthy, especially if you've kind of established boundaries and those get crossed, and you're just like, hey, I'm trying to live my life this way. I'm trying to grow in terms of my growth mindset. Maybe you grew up in a fixed mindset situation. But I think everyone, I don't know, each situation I think is going to be unique into itself, but there's definitely some deeper psychology aspects to that.
Right. And I'm sure you may have encountered this already, but I'm a huge history nerd. So this is a historical question, but it's very relevant to the points you were making. So, you know, 2022 is a very complex, volatile, tumultuous period of time. Very anxious period of time, probably more so than many others. As far as balancing, the growth mindset from the fixed mindset, is it harder to do that now versus, let's say, 100 years ago or 200 years ago? Because I feel like on one hand, people now have more access to technology. On the other hand, bombarded with, social media, bombarded with a whole litany of other problems. And, I think about older times, life expectancy was drastically much shorter, but it almost seemed like um, it was kind of easier to kind of clear your head or something like that. Things seemed a lot more linear and straightforward. Even if it came to maybe starting a business. I mean, granted, there was like different problems back then, but it seems like maybe from a cerebral level, you don't have to deal with, let's say, you know, there's always been pandemics, but let's say, COVID, and then, social media, and then, people doxing each other and toxic behavior. You can ruin people's reputations in a fraction of a second. You couldn't do that in the 1800s. In fact, you might have actually brought more problems onto yourself. Like and it seemed like people were very rugged and very resilient in those days. I'm sure, if you talk to your grandparents or if I talk to my grandparents, it's very impressive, the resolve for just the average person back then, like Great Depression and World War II and, things like that. So I kind of wanted to know what your thoughts were.
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I love that you're a history buff as well. I think there's a little bit of pro and con there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully, if I say something wrong, I mean, in the 1800s, I might get hung for it, right? But
Right. Yeah. Sure.
we don't have that today.
Yeah.
But
Something.
yeah,
Somebody might
kind of
challenge you
the
to a duel. Yeah. Duels were legal
yeah,
for a very long time in the United States. I think until like 80 years
it
ago
was
or
very
something.
yeah, it was very very rough time.
Yeah.
And kind of to your point, right? I mean, I think that's where a lot of that stems from. I mean, if you even just look at grandparents who were in any world war, the mentality was, hey, the emotional side of things, the mental side of things, I got to lock that up, right? I just got to
Sure.
be exteriorly tough for my family when when they returned, if they returned, and a lot of that, because it's like we had the silent generation and then the
Sure.
boomers who were raised by that silent generation, and they were pretty silent themselves, if we're honest, right? But so yeah, I think there's a little bit of pro and con, as we kind of go throughout those periods in history. But today, for sure, man. I mean, COVID was a once in a generational, like
Right.
perfect storm where, technology in and of itself was kind of, already hindering some of the growth mindsets because we're constantly following people who are successful or at least appear successful,
Right.
and comparing that and using those as the measuring tape to our own life. But then when you're locked into a box or your house, right, for 2 years, and
Right.
that's all you have access to, yeah, I do think there were some repercussions for that. But so yeah, I don't know. I think a little bit of pro and con, but I think the cons in today's world, if we're talking about phones and technology and social media, we can also use those for good too.
Right.
I just think it's how you're letting it impact you, and some of that is conscious, right? Some of that is subconscious. Like if I scrolled through my feed right now on any social media channel and I see, oh, so and so just got a Lamborghini, or oh, so and so just got a new job
Sure.
promotion, I can see
And
that
everyone,
stuff really quickly.
many are full of shit anyway. You see the yacht, you see the Lamborghini. Like okay, somebody rented that out for like $500 for the day or something.
Right.
There's a whole lot of that, going on to to say the least. And
Yeah.
something I wanted to ask you too, and it's a follow-up question. Do you think the problem between, I guess you could say, balancing the growth and the fixed mindset is because it seems like nowadays, and it not, I think the fault doesn't per se rest on any type of one entity or group, but are people a little too concerned about themselves? You know what I'm saying? Like, between, what, social media, and you could say, everything else that goes on. I think is it fair to say it makes people kind of spiral instead of just go into some sort of introspection? Like for instance, like, you mentioned you're a father. I'm a father as well. I have a 5-year-old son. And, the thing is, I think this goes for many people. Once you have a kid, a lot of things that probably bothered you or irritated are virtually non-existent, because your main focus is not you. It's somebody else who, a very, a precious life, that relies on you, your son or daughter and things like that. And I felt like maybe in older times, this was, in any given continent, maybe communities were tighter, maybe families were tighter, but like I said, I'm a huge history nerd, but I never got the impression that people kind of made a mountain out of a molehill for every single event in life. Not to say that there aren't bad things that happen. I mean, life is full of tragedy, even as we are talking in 2022. But it seems like on one hand, maybe in older days you could say life was very fleeting, people died fast, and the value of life kind of wasn't there. People kind of expected to pass away early on, and then nowadays it's like let let me obsess over anything I can possibly think of, and then I don't know, it seems like we're at this weird kind of impasse, right now, and I was thinking that could be you could say that could be a obstacle to that, because maybe like a lot of things in social media, people just can't detach themselves in many ways. You can't. I think like the zoom is always 1000x. I think for a lot of people in this day and age. So there's no. I don't know if it's a balance, or I don't know if it's a. I don't know what it is, to be honest. But these are just kind of things I thought of. Throughout this. I think it's good to improve yourself, but obsessing over every little bit, it seems like a slippery slope, at least for a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%, man. And to your point, right? This is maybe a good plug to be to have a
Sure.
kid, live
Right.
outside,
Yeah.
live
Oh, yeah.
outside yourself. Your world totally changes, right? But it could be something as simple as like, my 3-year-old, for instance, if it's like I'm thirsty, it's like, well, grab the cup and you can get the water. It's right there, right?
Right.
But the first words out of his mouth, at least for now, is I can't, right? And it's like, well, no, you
Sure.
can't yet because you haven't tried.
Right.
I'm
Right.
not going to run over there and get it for you because, trying to teach you a little bit of self-dependence at this point. I think, in
Sure.
that era of families, and everything growing up, there was more self-dependence being taught because you had to, right? I mean,
Right.
you're potentially grabbing a gun and going to war at 16, 14,
Yeah.
defending the homestead, whatever era it is, right? So there was a lot more responsibility placed at a much
Yeah.
younger age. And I think that's kind of fleeting in today's world, as well, where it's just like, man, sometimes you're seeing grown men, and this might be getting a little off topic, but seeing grown men in their late 20s, 30s, even 40s, or even later, right? And they haven't fully grown up because they were never
Sure.
handed that mantle of responsibility, right? So I think, yeah, there is a balance to your point, but I think we get caught up in balance too much. That's a word that's thrown out, and
Sure.
everyone's always trying to achieve that. It's almost like the goalposts keep moving in terms of like, well, what is balance, right? And for everybody, I think it's going to be different. But I think just approaching that and just little tiny opportunities to instill kind of a growth mindset in, friends, family, whoever's around you in your sphere, to be that person of change, right? As you yourself are trying to strive for that.
Yeah, I'm sure balance is nothing concrete. It's never a finite destination, but it's kind of like if you're the person that loves to walk, then you're always going to be getting better. If you love the slow, you could say gradual process of going about things instead of rushing through things, that has way more resiliency and longevity than somebody or just people just looking to rush towards, whether it's fixing a problem with themselves or outsider society. But listen, I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming on. This was a great presentation. I'm glad we had this little segment at the end to hash through hash out some of these things.